The airport was loud, too loud. Announcements echoed overhead, calling passengers to distant gates, and the sound of luggage wheels scraping against the polished floors created a symphony of chaos. But for Ava, the noise was nothing more than a muffled backdrop. She stood still amidst the rushing tide of people, her hands clutching her phone like it was the only anchor in a world spinning out of control. The message on her screen burned itself into her memory. Flight delayed by 4 hours.
Hang tight, love. 4 hours.
Another endless wait. Another small but painful delay in seeing him. She exhaled, closing her eyes for a moment. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass walls of the terminal. Her makeup smudged from the restless night she'd spent anticipating this moment. Her long coat wrinkled from the 3-hour drive to get here. And yet, none of it mattered. All she cared about was him. All she cared about was seeing Noah again. It had been 7 months and 21 days since they'd last stood face to face. 7 months and 21 days since he kissed her goodbye at this same airport. The weight of his duffel bag pulling him backward as he boarded that flight to Berlin. His work. Always his work. He was brilliant, driven, everything she admired in a person, but his ambition had built a chasm between them. A chasm she didn't know how much longer she could navigate. When they first met, their world had been simple. He was the charming architect who had spilled coffee on her book at a small cafe downtown, and she was the writer who pretended to be annoyed, but secretly loved the way his sheepish smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. Their connection had been instant, magnetic. Within weeks, they were inseparable, stealing moments in crowded parks, sharing late-night conversations about the lives they wanted to build together, whispering promises that felt as solid as stone. But when the opportunity in Berlin came, everything shifted. She'd encouraged him to take it, of course. "It's your dream," she'd said, masking the ache in her chest. "You have to go." He had hesitated, torn between the life they were building and the career he'd worked so hard for. In the end, she convinced him. They'd make it work, they said. Love could stretch across oceans, across time zones. They were strong enough, weren't they? The weeks after his departure were a haze of phone calls, video chats and text messages that tried to fill the void. At first it was enough. His voice, though distant, still felt close like a warm embrace in the cold. But as time wore on, the cracks began to show. The calls became shorter, the time zones more unforgiving. Her nights were his mornings, her free weekends were his busiest hours. And though they tried to bridge the gap with photos and handwritten letters, the weight of his absence pressed heavier on her shoulders with every passing day. Some nights she lay awake staring at the ceiling, her phone beside her on the pillow, wondering if he felt it too, the loneliness, the doubt. Did he still trace her name in the condensation on his shower glass the way she traced his? Did he still replay their memories like a favourite song, or were those moments already fading into the background of his new life? She hated these thoughts, hated the small, insidious voice that whispered maybe it was easier for him. But then there were the moments that reminded her why she held on. The time he sent her flowers on a random Tuesday, the note reading, "I saw these and thought of you. Miss you, Ava." The night he stayed up until 3 a.m, just to talk her through an anxiety attack after a bad day at work. The way he still called her Sunshine, the nickname he'd given her the day they met because, he said, her smile could light up a room. It was those moments that kept her grounded, even when the distance felt unbearable. Now, standing in the terminal, she felt the weight of those months between them like an invisible chain. She scrolled through her phone, her thumb brushing over the photos they'd taken together the last time he was home. Him holding her in front of the Christmas tree, his scarf wrapped loosely around her neck. Her grinning up at him as they stood on the pier, the ocean stretching endlessly behind them. They looked so happy, so certain. But the Ava standing here now wasn't certain anymore. She loved him, yes, but love alone was beginning to feel like it wasn't enough. She missed the small, mundane moments, the way his hand felt in hers as they walked through the city, the sound of his laugh filling their apartment, the quiet comfort of just being near him without words. Long-distance love, she'd come to realise, wasn't just about missing someone. It was about missing parts of yourself that only came alive in their presence. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. A new message from Noah. 4 more hours feels like torture. I can't wait to see you. Sunshine! She smiled despite herself, the nickname tugging at her heartstrings. Maybe it wasn't perfect, maybe it was messy and hard and filled with uncertainty. But for now she would wait, because as much as it hurt to be apart, the idea of letting him go hurt even more. Ava glanced at the arrival board again, her reflection ghosted over the glowing text. 4 hours. It wasn't forever, it just felt like it. And when Noah finally stepped through those sliding doors, his bag slung over one shoulder, his tired eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on her, every moment of waiting, every pang of doubt, every sleepless night away, she ran to him, her feet moving before her mind could catch up, and when his arms wrapped around her, the world stopped spinning. For the first time in months, everything felt right again. But even as she clung to him, burying her face in his neck, she couldn't ignore the quiet fear whispering in the back of her mind. How much longer can love like this last?